First up, Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan has said that the next few quarters will be engaged in combating inflation. India's wholesale price inflation hit a 5-month high in May, and prospects of a weak monsoon and turmoil in Iraq have increased the risk of rising food and fuel prices. In May, wholesale prices rose faster than expected at 6.01%. At 19%, a 19% increase in potato prices during the month pushed up food inflation to 9.5% from 8.64% in April. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has attributed the rise in food prices to withholding of stocks on account of apprehension of a weak monsoon. He has asked state governments to take effective steps to ensure that speculative hoarding is discouraged. The Finance Minister has said that the government is committed to take measures which will positively impact the GDP and result in higher growth rate. He added the government is watching the movement of the rupee closely. Jaitley attributed the instability of the rupee to the crisis in Iraq and a global fear of rising oil prices. RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan is addressing the press in the national capital. Let's cross live.
Financial system. But we also have in mind two very important medium-term tasks which we have to engage in. One is ensuring that there's adequate finance for infrastructure build-out, and that's a task on which you'll see some policy measures announced soon. And the second is the very important task of enabling financial inclusion, not just of poor and poorly reached people in society today, but also small and medium enterprises. So we will undertake some measures in that respect also. But let me leave the conjunctural issues to the question-answer session, if we have any time for that, and talk about something which is very important, which I think is worth opining on, which is the Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Committee's report. This is one of the most important, well-researched as well as well-publicized reports in Indian financial history, and in many ways suggests how things should be done. It not only lays out the functions of the financial sector and how it should be structured, but also how legislation, regulation, and governance ought to look like. So, given the work the authors of this report have done, they truly have to be commended for their national service. The influence of this report will be felt for many years to come. Now, there is much to like and agree with in the report, in laying out the need for consumer protection, for example, in raising the issue of whether products sold are suitable for the target consumer, in a sense, popularizing the word suitability, and putting the onus on financial institutions to determine the suitability for customers. The report has forced regulators to review their consumer protection frameworks. We at the RBI are currently engaged in this process, informed by the very valuable guidelines in the FSLRC report. There is much more of great value. The FSLRC's emphasis, as Mrs. Bhattacharya pointed out, on a clear monetary framework culminated in the Dr. Urjit Patel Committee report, which will guide our thinking in the years to come. Similarly, its focus on creating new institutions like the Financial Resolution Authority, which will help us resolve distressed financial institutions at minimum cost to the economy, is much needed. In fact, we are way behind other economies in the extent to which we can resolve financial institutions, and that's an area where I want us to catch up as fast as possible. Now, I could go on in praising the FSLRC report, but I come here not to praise it, but to debate some of it. I will argue there are two fundamental areas of tension that I see, and I want to put those on the table. One is the oversight of regulators. The FSLRC recommends that the laws should not micromanage, a point that Mrs. Bhattacharya pointed out, thus giving regulators the freedom to fill in the details in consonance with the changing needs of the economy. At the same time, the FSLRC wants to check and balance the activities of regulators through judicial oversight, and it seems like this is appropriate, give with one hand, but check and balance with the other. The problem, of course, is that too much of checks and balances could completely vitiate the flexibility afforded by rewriting laws. We need to find a proper balance, and the balance may vary with our level of development. And I worry that we haven't thought through what the appropriate balance is fully. The second area of tension is the appropriate size and scope of regulators. The FSLRC's recommendations, I dare say, seem somewhat schizophrenic here. On the one hand, it emphasizes synergies in bringing together some regulators into one entity. But in the process, it suggests breaking up other regulators with attendant loss of synergy. So you get synergies by combining regulators on one hand, but you lose them in breaking up other regulators. There's very little discussion of the empirical magnitude of synergies gained or synergies lost, which then make the recommendations seem somewhat faddish and impressionistic rather than based on deep analysis.
All right, let's get a word from our correspondent Ashish Mehrishi, who's joining us live from the national capital. Ashish, the RBI governor voicing some key concerns, inflation at an all-time high in May. This will be a worrying factor for the newly elected Modi government.
Very true. In fact, as you remember, Narendra Modi had very clearly said, Simi, that, achhe din aane wale, and the most important thing that they're going to work on is inflation. Now, if you remember, the consumer price inflation figure was okay. The government was very happy, but when the wholesale price index, the figure came, it certainly has dampened the mood of the entire government. In fact, if you see, Arun Jaitley had also issued a statement on his Facebook page where he's very worried about the inflation, because he knows that until and unless inflation comes down, the growth portion will not start. In fact, if you remember, this is what RBI has been doing. They have been trying to curb inflation by reducing, by increasing the interest rate, and they know unless the interest rate comes down, there is no other option but to unless the interest rate comes down, the cycle of growth will not start, and that cannot happen unless inflation comes down. Simi.
Absolutely, that seems to be a cycle there that Narendra Modi's government needs to come out of. The RBI governor, they're suggesting some reforms. Thanks so much, Ashish. We'll continue tracking this story with you.